In my time on YouTube, I have always tried to look at the positives of any piece of media that I consume. Not only do I do this because it's just an overall more fun experience to discuss topics I have strong passion for, but I also do so because I feel like no matter the quality of something, there will always be someone out there who loves it. Someone who may just want to hear about that thing in a more positive light. And I always try to be the person who can give that opportunity to them. Sometimes, though, I do find an exception to this mindset. Sometimes I find a game that frustrates me so badly that it sparks enough passion in me to actively rip into it. And recently, I found one of those exceptions. A little over a month ago, I had been given the opportunity to receive a free copy of Hello Neighbor as well as its sequel through an email, and at first I didn't really think much of it. Hello Neighbor didn't really spark my interest all too much. I remember it being received very poorly on release and being very messy, but that was about it. So I kinda just forgot about it for a while until eventually I had seen fellow YouTuber Fiznom streaming the game on his channel. Out of curiosity, I decided to hop into the stream to see what was going on, and I was greeted to this.
Hey Pastra, thank you Jennifer, welcome. I had a great time until I got to Act 3, honestly. Yo, Pastor, you want to see some cool Hold on a second. Hey, Pastor, look at this Yeah!
After that, I was invested. I was there for the rest of the stream, watching in horror as the game quickly deteriorated alongside poor Phil's mental health. And it was during this stream that I finally decided to use that free copy of the game and give Hello Neighbor a shot. And what I was greeted to was one of the most miserable, mind-numbing, and confusing experiences I have ever had playing a game. Hello Neighbor isn't just buggy, it isn't just confusing, it is a fundamentally broken and hollow experience from start to finish, which doubles down on all the flaws of the Mascot horror genre, while lacking any of the charm that makes many of those other games enjoyable. It is a degrading experience, which constantly tests your patience with each convoluted puzzle it throws your way, making you wonder how it even became popular in the first place. There is not a single thing in Hello Neighbor I found even remotely enjoyable or charming, and for that reason, I am making this video. I plan to go in depth, discussing the many aspects of this game that don't work for me, and showing how they all come together to create one of my least favorite game experiences of all time. So, without further ado, let's delve into it. So I feel like before I dive into the meat of this game, I should first go over its story to give you an idea of what Hello Neighbor is all about, and of course to talk about the issues I have with it. Hello Neighbor is a sandbox horror game where the entire premise revolves around us, the player, attempting to break into our neighbor's house to uncover the secrets of what lies within his basement. This premise is made crystal clear from the moment we open the game, with it opening on a cutscene showing the neighbor struggling to lock a child down there with several different locks and barricades. And it's this simple premise that the entire game is built off of. We do everything we do in the game to serve the purpose of discovering what it is that's down there, with us being even further incentivized by all the little clues and hints we both get in the main game, as well as in the game's many different alphas and betas which came before it. And you see, I don't actually have any issues with this being the premise of the game. Oftentimes, good horror can be built off of the most simple of ideas, and the mystery behind the basement gives the player a great incentive to actually want to do the many puzzles the game offers. My problem begins to arise, though, once we take into account how this mystery is actually presented to us. You see, Hello Neighbor is structured in 4 main story chapters, each one becoming more convoluted and challenging than the last one. And you would think, based on my description, that the basement's contents would be revealed near the end of these 4 chapters, but no. We learn what's down there at the end of the very first act. Right when the game is starting, after the easiest puzzle out of the 4 chapters, we already learn the contents of the basement. And to me, this is just the most confusing and frustrating decision I've ever seen for a game like this. This mystery was what drove people to want to play the game. We wanted to solve the puzzles because we wanted to see the basement's contents. And not only that, but the basement was always treated as the main selling point of the game in every single piece of media related to it. The alphas and betas treated it like it was our end game goal. The game opens by establishing it as the main mystery we want to solve. And even the cartoon they made that they wanted MatPat to dissect every single frame of had the basement as the entire driving force of the story. Once you take that out of the picture, it makes every single act which comes after feel incredibly pointless from a narrative perspective. Act 2 is fine in this department since it centers around us escaping the neighbor's basement, which is a fine enough reason to exist. But once we get to chapters 3 and 4, you realize that there is no reason for us to do anything. At least no apparent reason. You kinda just get plopped down in front of a big ass house and are expected to do all the puzzles with literally no incentive, which makes the later half of the game even more mind-numbing than it already was because it all feels utterly pointless. Like, imagine this sort of story structure being used in something like the original Bendy or Five Nights at Freddy's, both games within the same Mascot horror genre. Imagine in the original Bendy learning what the ink machine is at the end of chapter 1 rather than chapter 5. Wouldn't it make you lose so much interest in what the story was going to evolve into? Or in the first Five Nights at Freddy's, learning the name of the killer who did the bite of 87 and getting a perfect list of the names of every victim of said killer in chronological order. Okay, that's a bit dramatic, but I'm sure you get my point here. It's just that in any other game, I feel like this decision wouldn't make any sense, so it just really baffles me that it was made here. And that's before I even delve into what is in the basement. With it being the main mystery of the game as well as all the interesting hints we got about it, I was at least looking forward to what we were going to see down there regardless of how early we got to. And not very surprisingly, I found myself very underwhelmed. The basement is just a large maze-like area filled with doors and locks and weird props, with many different hints alluding to it being the holding place for a child that we don't even find down there. This was always a possible answer, I suppose, but considering the fact that earlier builds of the game went as far as to imply that it was a doorway to another world, I was just extremely disappointed. It just felt like the safest answer that they could have gone with, and I felt nothing once I got down there. Other than the basement, there are other pieces to this game's lore, but none of them really interested me at all because they felt like they had no real bearing or effect on the game. There's this strange, unexplained shadow monster which appears in the later half of the game with no real explanation, that to me just feels like theory fodder for the sake of it. And there's these many different death minigames we can play which imply the dark past of the neighbor. These are alright. They just kind of feel like they were arbitrarily put there to make the players theorize about what the lore of the game really is. Almost like the game was mimicking other Mascot horror series which came before it in an attempt to make itself more mainstream. Which I guess it succeeded at, so what do I know? The only other piece of lore regarding this game I really want to talk about in this segment comes in the form of the game's ending, which I find extremely frustrating. After getting through easily the most infuriatingly convoluted acts of the game, we face off against the shadow monster I mentioned earlier in one final section. And after we manage to defeat him once and for all, we discover that the entirety of the last 2 acts of the game were nothing but a dream. Yeah, The two parts of the game that had the least amount of incentive to even complete them in the first place were all for nothing, because they were just a dream that your character wakes up from. The end. That's the story of Hello Neighbor. At its best, it's a simple mystery which spoils itself at the very beginning, making it so the rest of the experience feels pointless and empty. And at its worst, it's a convoluted mess with no real vision that throws random lore tidbits at you purely so that people will talk about it and theorize. And yet, somehow to me, this isn't even close to the worst the game has to offer. The story may be messy, but it doesn't get anywhere close to infuriating me as much as actually playing the game does. So let's talk about that next. Oh god, the gameplay. Where do I even start with this? I guess if we're going to talk about the gameplay of Hello Neighbor, I should at least start by giving you an idea of what this game was supposed to play like in its earlier versions. The Hello Neighbor we saw in earlier builds was a very different game from what it is now, and with that in mind, it actually makes a lot of sense how it gained any form of popularity on YouTube. In the original pre-alpha of Hello Neighbor, we saw the gameplay center itself around the core idea of trying to stealth your way around a very claustrophobic house, all the while an AI chased you around which learned from your mistakes. This initial concept was always really cool to me. The idea of an AI which learns how you entered the house and combated it in different ways to make each attempt harder added an interesting challenge to the game which we didn't really see from horror games at the time. It made each attempt feel crucial, like any slip up would cost you by making your next go at things even harder than it was before. This idea also made the neighbor scarier by extension, with you wanting to stealth around and avoid being spotted by him at all costs. It was a simple mechanic which complemented the game's overall theme of being as stealthy as possible and trying to solve puzzles in a tight, closed-in environment. The house in the pre-alpha also played wonderfully into this gameplay loop, with its small size allowing the neighbor to easily patrol around and potentially find where the player was, leading to tense moments where you tried to finish what you were doing in each area as fast as humanly possible. With all this praise given to the earliest build of the game, you're probably wondering how it all started to go downhill after this. And the answer to that is several different things. As more alphas and betas were released for the game, it quickly became apparent that there was more care being put into the quantity of things added, rather than the quality of what was already there. With every alpha, the puzzles became more complicated and nonsensical, the house got bigger and harder to traverse, and there was less and less emphasis put on making the neighbor an actual intimidating threat. With each new update, the well-crafted experience that was the pre-alpha slowly fell apart as the project became more and more ambitious, until eventually some people who played the game like Markiplier even gave up on it, knowing that it was only going downhill from there.
You know what? I think that's enough mayhem for one episode. I'm gonna end this one here. I criticize it a lot just because, like, there's a lot more stuff. But I can't honestly say that the stuff is better. And that's the one thing that I'll say about it, because if I'm expecting as the game develops it's gonna get, like, more logical and sensible, and, you know, it just seems even more nonsensical than it was before. So there's a lot more, but it's less refined, you know what I mean?
You'd think with this kind of outcry that the developers behind the game would listen to some extent and try to make the full game a bit closer to those earlier builds that people loved. But lo and behold, Hello Neighbor fully released in 2017, and oddly followed a very similar structure to the release of the alphas that came before it. With each act of the main game, Hello Neighbor slowly falls apart in a very similar fashion, with Act 1 being easily the best portion of the game for similar reasons to the pre-alpha, Act 2 becoming a lot more annoying to play due to the size of the house as well as the convoluted nature of the puzzles, and Acts 3 and 4 being some of the most unbearable gameplay I've ever had the displeasure of experiencing. So with that said, I think it's time we actually start to pick apart what makes the gameplay of Hello Neighbor's main game so horribly flawed compared to these earlier builds.
Astra!
Oh my god! Okay, Lankman, I know what you're gonna say, but hear me out for once. I get that it's off-brand for me to make a video that's super negative, but could you honestly tell me a positive thing about this game that I could possibly bring up?
Oh, what? No, that's not why I'm here at all. I hate this game too. Come on, Pasture. Even I have standards. Talk about a bad game all you want, so long as it's horror-themed. I was just coming in here to tell you that someone broke into our house.
Oh. Huh. It's weird that we're actually agreeing on something for once. That's actually kind of a breath of fresh air. I'm glad to hear that. Wait. What was that you said at the end there?
Alright, Pastra! I know you like to be positive about everything, but Hello Neighbor is the last fucking straw.
Oh my god! Phil? How the hell did you even get in here? And is that why you're here? No, yeah, you're right, dude. This game is shit. This video's actually a critical analysis of it.
Oh.
Okay, can you leave now?
This game is garbage. I seriously couldn't find a single thing that was even remotely salvageable or appealing during my playthrough. I came in with low expectations, bottom of the barrel expectations, but somehow within a few hours this game managed to tunnel down through the bottom of that barrel and all the way down into the core of the Earth. Hello Neighbor should be simple. You can see what the game is going for on its store page. Wait, what the f***? Why does this GIF look so good compared to the actual game? A simple stealth game with puzzle elements, some platforming here and there, and an open sandbox map to explore and run around in. Sounds good on paper, right? But the execution of every single one of these elements is just wrong! It's just wrong! Wrong! The Neighbor's AI is rock solid stupid. All this talk about complex AI routines and smart decisions and all of that is fucking bullshit. This guy can be outrun easily. You can throw random items at his head to slow him down, and as long as he doesn't get stuck clipping through the floor, he will always just beeline straight to you. His pathing behaviors are as complex and advanced as a Roomba with running shoes on. Traps? Cameras? Who cares? Just stack some boxes or build enough momentum with a trash lid to shoot yourself up into the sky where he can't even get to you. Or moreover, just sprint into the house anyway, since there's a chance that this super smart AI doesn't even know how to navigate its own fucking home, and will just get stuck in the geometry anyway. The only reason this guy is even remotely a threat is that you don't even know where the fuck you're going in this poorly lit, cheap, regurgitated maze of rooms. I mean, level design? What is that? Just throw a bunch of copy-paste assets together and keep stacking random rooms one on top of each other. I'm sure that'll be fun, right? A party room that leads into an attic that has an elevator that leads into a roof that has a ladder that leads into a train station that leads into a camera room that leads into a bedroom. Wait, where am I? The 4th floor? Yeah, f*** it. What genuinely was the thought process here? Was there any at all? Because this genuinely feels like an AI-generated map. Where's the flow? Where's the thought put into what the player might experience seeing all these cobbled together nonsense areas? I've seen Gmod adventure maps made by 14-year-old Russian kids that have more thought put into it than this. Where am I supposed to go? Oh, but of course, it's not enough to have a dumb fuck AI harassing you through this Chinese rip of an Escher painting. You also have to solve puzzles in it too, for some reason. Like, environmental puzzles, you know? The kind where you need time and thought to solve. Physics puzzles, like in Half-Life, where you throw a ball at a lever while standing on its corresponding platform, turning off the power outside the house so you can get past a gate to get a key, using a magnet to get an electrified crowbar and then cooling it with water, taking a record player up to the roof so you can play its horrible music to make the plants die so you can get access to a gear system and jam it to the box. Wait, what the fuck? What are these puzzles? These are like 90s point-and-click levels of obtuse cryptic puzzles. And I played those when I was a kid, and it took me hours to solve them without a guide, and at least those had built-in hints, you know? This game has nothing. It just expects you to know which one of these hundreds of objects in this giant house will be used to get this thing from the thing on the other floor, all while ignoring all the other random things that may be important for another one of these nonsense puzzles. Throw a box at this one apple painting out of several identical apple paintings in the room to reveal a secret door. Why are the puzzles here? Why are they so complex in the game where you have to stealthily and carefully hide from my smart boy AI brain guy? That makes no fucking sense! Mary Poppins your way from the highest point in the map with a parasol to a random platform so you can get a seed to plant in the garden, then watch a tree grow to get a golden apple that does nothing! That makes no sense! There's a fucking key card in the freezer, but you can't get it until you thaw the ice that it's stuck in, so you thaw the ice that it's stuck in, so you turn off the power to the house, but whoops! There's a generator just stuck on a cage on a random part outside the house, but you can't get the cage open until you solve a painting puzzle where you take all the items from a room and then place them mirror opposite to the painting, but what? The guitar is missing and you don't know where it fucking is, so you need to die until it's nighttime so you can get through the moon door that's only open during the night, but wait, whoops! There's a sun door after that, so you need to die again to go through the sun door, but whoops! The moon door is now closed, so you use a chair to keep the moon door open. Then you go back to day to open the sun door, and then you get the guitar so you can put it on the display, and then it opens the generator so you can I fell off again. So you can platform and turn off the generator, then go back to the kitchen and wait 2 entire fucking minutes for this ice to thaw out. Just wait. Riveting gameplay, boys. Riveting gameplay, boys. Yeah. 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 Woo! Gameplay! Woo! In this clip, the neighbor despawned too, so like, imagine doing all this and waiting for the card to thaw, but you actually have to sneak around and avoid him? God, this game sucks. And did you think I was done? Oh, no, sir, I'm f***ing not. Next is the platforming. Platforming? Yeah, you know, the best thing to put in your stealth puzzle horror game? Platforming? I wouldn't even mind platforming if, like, your character controlled even remotely fine, but he doesn't. There are entire sections of this game that rely on you making these really tight jumps over this nonsense geometry, but for some inexplicable reason, the developers chose to make the jumping the worst thing in the game. Just the most floaty fucking jumps in existence, with gravity that feels like you're on the moon, and you better be ready, because the second that you press that jump button, the game will commit to the jumping arc your character started with. No mid-air control, no strafing, no nothing. That's just
one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
What was the thought process behind this? Yeah, you know, let's just put platforming in this game, but make it the floatiest, most uncomfortable mechanic ever, because we fucking hate whoever's playing this. And whoever says this is a technical limitation or some shit, oh, no. Absolutely not. It's not a bug or a mistake, it's a conscious feature. The umbrella item that you find if you open it up lets you actually strafe once you're in the air with it. Complete air mobility, as long as you let yourself fall for a while. But why not just take the strafing capabilities of the umbrella controls and just paste them into regular jumping air movement? Don't you tell me that's not how it works. I know how it fucking works. And it would fix one of the most infuriating parts of this game with a single kilobyte patch. But I guess the developers hate you, so go fuck yourself with a fucking rusted nail bat, you fucking head. And the worst part is, the worst part is, this horror game isn't fucking scary. Oh, they found me. Gotta go. Just, you can take over for me, Postra. Just, bye-bye!
Is he gone? Oh my god, I think that actually scared him off, thank goodness. Okay, where was I? Wait a minute. Did he write and record an entire section of this video for me?
No, don't be silly, Pastra. Nobody would be crazy enough to want to subject themselves to doing the holy shit he actually did.
Well, guess that's a load off my back. I guess I'll just keep going from where he left off. So despite being primarily labeled as a horror game and being part of the ever-growing subgenre of mascot horror, Hello Neighbor isn't scary in the slightest. And the thing is with this game compared to many other games of its type is that it makes no effort to be. Any elements that could be at play to potentially make Hello Neighbor a competent horror title are just not there. The game makes no attempt to build atmosphere outside of a droning track that plays when the neighbor is close by. But even with how intimidating this track sounds, it's immediately ruined when the payoff to that suspense and buildup is this. Just a simple, repetitive guitar riff which plays in the background of the most mundane, uneventful chases that one can experience in a horror game. These chases, which make up the vast majority of the game's actual attempts at horror, fail in almost every conceivable way. As the intruder who broke into my house brought up earlier, the neighbor's AI is not only so broken that he often gets stuck or lost in the middle of chasing you, but even when he's working properly, the chases aren't tense in the slightest because our character moves faster than he does. This essentially makes it so the only possible way to ever get caught by the neighbor is if you get stuck on something or he catches you off guard. And even then, it's not that scary to experience that because there's little to no consequences to being caught. You just get teleported to the other side of the road with all your progress saved, and that's the end of it. The only other instances of horror I can possibly think of in Hello Neighbor come in the form of these nightmare sequences where we're tasked with different objectives, all the while avoiding different mannequin enemies which try to kill us. They take place in these darkly lit, surreal environments, and compared to the rest of the game, I find that they actually do have decent atmosphere. The only real problem I have with them is that the actual challenge aspect of doing them is so incredibly tedious and annoying to properly do that any feeling of fear that could possibly be created is immediately overshadowed by how overwhelmingly frustrating they are. Take, for example, this shopping cart section. Our objective here is to push this shopping cart to the end of the level within the time limit, all the while collecting the right objects and avoiding being caught by the many mannequin shoppers. I feel like this section, in theory, has the potential to be at least a little bit scary. The mall environment is so surreal and bizarre that it lends itself to being unnerving, and the idea of having these monsters all around you that you can't alert to your presence could possibly make for some really tense gameplay. This potential immediately gets thrown out the window though, purely because of how convoluted this section is, as well as how horribly broken it is. Now, with all this said about the game, I do feel like it's worth mentioning that Hello Neighbor at one point really did have the potential to be a really scary game. Going back to the pre-alpha and other early builds I discussed in the gameplay section, those actually did a really good job at providing us with a solid atmosphere and scary chases. As well as the genuine suspense that comes from not wanting to be caught by the neighbor, the chase sequences in and of themselves had a much greater emphasis on catching you off guard and making you panic. Just take a look at the vast difference between how chases are in the main game compared to how they were in the pre-alpha. In the pre-alpha, chases began with this loud, overwhelming music which made you want to get away at all costs, all the while being pursued in a tight, claustrophobic space that the threat often had an easier time traversing than you did. Combine this with the constant fear of knowing that being caught would lead to an even harder attempt next time you respawned, and you had the groundwork for an excellent horror game. All this said is why I really believe that the full game of Hello Neighbor isn't scary on purpose. It feels like the original builds of the game were made with horror at least partially in mind, but as the game grew in popularity, that horror was slowly removed to make it more easily marketable to the many children who watch YouTubers play it. It's a problem that I feel plagues a lot of indie horror titles nowadays, even ones that I personally enjoy quite a lot. And every single time I see it, I'm always disappointed because I think about what they could have been if they just tried a little harder. Hello Neighbor could have been really scary. It could have had an extremely tense atmosphere which made it hard to play, but instead it favored its own marketing to the point that the horror tag on its Steam feels like false advertising. And this is all before I even mention the elephant in the room when discussing this game's horror and marketing, one which I have purposely saved for last, that being the art style. I feel like similarly to many other Mascot horror games, Hello Neighbor's art style is easily the most iconic part of it. The over-exaggerated, cartoony style of the game is, to me, both its strongest aspect, but also one of the reasons I dislike it so much. Allow me to explain. The visuals of Hello Neighbor at their best are often very over the top and charming. The characters and objects are often extremely exaggerated, making their most notable features very recognizable from the moment you look at them, thus making them decently memorable. This sort of design philosophy lends itself well to the more surreal nature of the game, with easily my favorite set pieces being the ones which double down on this style to create unique environments. Take for example the shopping mall I mentioned earlier. This area is a great example of how Hello Neighbor doubling down on the strengths of its art style can actually make for some really cool and memorable set pieces. Even parts of the house lend themselves to this, with some of the rooms being an interesting spectacle to look at. My issues arise with the art style of Hello Neighbor though, once you take into account how horribly inconsistent it is. Despite the game's main strength coming from this more surreal and cartoonish approach, many of the rooms and other areas in the game don't really use it. In fact, many rooms within the game have next to nothing in them. For every unique set piece that is a marvel to look at, there are at least 3 rooms that either have the same assets copy and pasted all over them, or more often than not are almost completely empty and barren. Even though the main allure of the later houses in Acts 2 and 3 are the spectacle of how massive they are, they somehow feel horribly barren with how little there actually is in them. And this barren emptiness that's felt when exploring the house is also a problem once we take a look at the area around it. The only set piece in the game with any real detail put into it is the neighbor's house, with all the houses and props creating the neighborhood around it feeling empty and flat. In some instances, you can even see where the edge of the map is, making it feel more like you're on some kind of Windows XP background rather than a real tangible location. Just walking around the map either outside or inside the house gives off the feeling like these locations were unfinished and rushed, like the team behind it didn't have nearly enough assets to make up for the massive ambition that was the scale of the locations they were going for. It ends up making the experience of the game feel even worse to play, because rather than exploring some massive spectacle like they were clearly going for, you're instead just traversing the same barren, empty rooms over and over again until you find some important item you need to continue. This empty feeling that comes from every location you explore, combined with the baffling and confusing nature of the gameplay, and the lack of incentive you have to even go forward, make me wonder who Hello Neighbor was even made for. This game has nothing appealing about it that other Mascot horror games don't just do better than it, and even the aspects that I could see people enjoying are completely contradicted by the other flaws of the game. If you enjoy Hello Neighbor for the original concept, then that idea was horribly lost in translation from its alphas to the full game. If you like it for its lore, then whatever interesting mystery was present in those earlier builds is just completely lost at the start of the game, with the only real story left being one which is just convoluted and confusing for the sake of it, and offers no satisfying conclusion in the end by having it all undone by being a dream. If you enjoy the game for the art, then the art style is horribly inconsistent and actively looks worse than those same alpha builds which I constantly compare the full game to. And finally, if you enjoy the game for the puzzles, then I honestly have to ask how. What appeal is there in a puzzle which is absolutely impossible to solve without the help of someone else guiding you through it? Because the puzzles in this game are so outlandish and confusing that there is no way anyone could think to solve them on their own. For every pro that makes Hello Neighbor shine, there are so many flaws which horribly detract from it, making me genuinely confused how anyone could find appeal in this game at all. It just feels like a mountain of missed potential, one which started with a vision but was slowly corrupted by the desire to make it as marketable as humanly possible. I don't even see an ounce of passion in this game, which is really the reason why I hate it so much compared to other Mascot horror games. No matter how flawed a game is, like the original Bendy or Security Breach, I can always see the good in those products because I see genuine love for what they are, for the vision behind them. Bendy had enough love behind it to be able to create an amazing sequel which worked on improving the flaws of the previous game. And Security Breach was a game which had the main fault of its creators just wanting to do too much and being too ambitious. When I look at Hello Neighbor, I don't see that same vision. I don't see a group of misguided developers going in too over their heads and creating something flawed with a lot of heart behind it. I just see an empty game, one which has every element of it catered towards an audience which they believe will make them the most money possible. Its lore is confusing and cryptic so people will theorize and make videos about it, not because there's a genuine story they wish to tell. The gameplay is convoluted and messy because the longer you take to finish it, the more videos can be made on it. And the characters and art style are so cartoonish and over the top because that's the easiest way to make merch out of it. To me, Hello Neighbor is the worst game that Mascot Horror has to offer, because it represents every element that makes the genre flawed, with none of the elements that make those other titles stand out. I get nothing out of playing it but frustration, and I genuinely can't wrap my head around how it managed to become nearly as popular as it is today. If you genuinely enjoy this game, I'm sorry that I couldn't see what it is that makes it so appealing to you. I wanted to like it. I wanted there to be elements in there that I could defend, but there just aren't. I just don't get it. As of writing this video, I've yet to even see anything from the game's sequel, Hello Neighbor 2, so I genuinely don't know if my criticism still holds up in that game or if it's just another bad title. Part of me now wants to know, but another part of me is so drained from the experience that was this first one that I never want to touch the franchise again. I suppose only time will tell, and who knows, if this video does well enough, I may be able to grit my teeth and go through it for a follow-up. But in the meantime though, I'm going to end this discussion here. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. It genuinely means the world to me to have you here, and even though the subject matter of this video was far more negative than I usually like to make, I'm glad I was able to get it out of my system. I hope to see you again in whatever my next project ends up being. Goodbye for now.